Friends, we are very happy to inform you that e-modules are prepared for B.Ed program at Telangana by the School of Education, Osmania University under Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching Scheme MHRD New Delhi. It's indeed our pleasure to share with the teacher educators and the prospective teachers and get maximum benefit out of it. It's a first of its attempt by us. We continue to add many more such lessons to share with you all.
Good morning. I am Khaiser Banu, working as Assistant Professor in Princess Duri Shehwar College of Education for Women. I welcome you to this series. Before I begin the session, I would like to the objectives of today's session. After the completion of this series, teachers will be able to comprehend the meaning of the term language acquisition and language learning. They will be able to develop the ability to differentiate between language acquisition and language learning. Student teachers will be able to deliberate on key aspects of language learning process in language acquisition. They shall get acquainted with various language learning strategies. Student teachers will be able to assist reflection on current understanding of the language learning process in language acquisition and language learning. They will be able to endorse better discussion on language learning process in language acquisition and language learning. Now, what actually is acquisition? What do you acquire? As a child, she listens to her, as an infant, when an infant is born, so there are various activity it develops, as the infants grow. From 0 to 2 years, they'll be crawling, standing, able to walk, talk, understand. There are various milestones that they cover, and one of the important element is the acquisition, of language. They acquire language from their parents, from their members which is surrounded by them. So, linguists divide a language into different level of description and analysis, even though all the levels interact and function simultaneously. Every learner must acquire different levels. These different levels, a student has to learn language at these levels of functioning in order to express or communicate, maybe orally or in writing. There is a universal belief that human being is innate. We are born with an innate capacity for language acquisition. Hence, children learn all this knowledge in the first language without any efforts, but seldom achieve it in second language. We learn to speak, express, understand our mother tongue better. Okay. So, as we learn it from our parents, the members surrounded by us, from our families, we develop the ability to communicate in our mother tongue. We don't make any efforts in learning the grammar, vocabulary, structure, meaning in the mother tongue. But when you learn a foreign language, apart from mother tongue, when you go to school and then you picks up language there, then you will start with letters, and then bilabial, monosyllabic, bisyllabic, multi and tetra, polysyllabic words you learn. You learn all these words and then you learn the grammatical aspect, you learn the vocabulary, and then you picks up language. You will be able to read, understand, speak, deliberate. So you make in in mother tongue you acquire all this, but seldom you achieve it in your second language. So, I hope the knowledge pertaining to acquisition is clear. We acquire our language skills, we acquire our mother tongue from our parents. Same, I take an example. Suppose you are learning cycling, and cycling is a skill. So, if you sit and then imagine you are paddling, you will not develop, you will not learn riding a bicycle. You need to actually sit, paddle, and then you will feel, you must go through, you will fall, then stand, be on it, and then you will slowly picks up riding a cycle. Same way, that's a skill. Same way, when you come to language learning, you make deliberate efforts when it comes to various aspects of language. Okay? So, language acquisition, you acquire it from your parents, family, and you don't make any deliberate efforts in learning the grammar, vocabulary at the time you are learning that language, your mother tongue. When you picks up, you don't learn it, as you learn a foreign language in schools, there is no deliberate efforts. You learn to communicate from the parents, no matter. We have taken the example of mother tongue, but imagine if you are exposed to any other language, the child has innate capacity to even acquire that language. There are families now where parents are well versed with English, grandparents aren't. So, the child communicates with parents in English and with grandparents in their mother tongue. Though the child is of just 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of age, but he has innate capacity to communicate in both the languages efficiently. They are not communicating with their grandparents in English. They only communicate with their parents in English because their parents are well versed with that language. So the child possesses innate ability of acquisition when they are exposed to the language. So, during this period they are unaware of the grammatical rules. This happens when they acquire their first language. In order to acquire a language, they need a scope of natural communication, which is usually the parents or the family members. During infancy, language processing takes place in many areas of the brain, but gradually with the lapse of time it becomes confined to the 2 areas. As a child, when they are infant, they are growing, they are picking up language, then their brain has too many space, too many areas where they develop language competency, where they develop learning a language. But as they grow big with the lapse of time, these areas are confined to 2. The first is Broca's area. This is situated in the left frontal, frontal brain. It is situated to the left frontal cortex and is involved in the production of patterns of vocal and sign. It is restricted to vocal and sign, sound and signs. This area is actively involved in language acquisition process. Broca's area, which is in the left frontal cortex, which helps you in learning the patterns or in production of vocal as well as sign language. And this is very much actively involved in language acquisition. When the child is small, when he is able to acquire language from his parents and the family members, this part of the brain is very much involved. And the second area is Wernicke's area. which is situated in the left temporal cortex. In the brain, left temporal cortex, that is primarily involved in language comprehension. This area is actively involved in language learning. So, we have differentiated two stages. Now, the Broca's area is limited to the language acquisition stage. That is, it has two very important things: the patterns of sounds, that is in vocal as well as sign language, whereas language learning happens with Wernicke area. Okay. Wernicke area, it is situated in the left temporal cortex, that is primarily involved in language comprehension. You will be able to think language. Broca's area, you will be able to develop the sounds and signs. Wernicke's area, you will be able to pick up language. However, language acquisition refers to the process of natural assimilation involving intuition and subconscious learning. So, acquisition is a natural process and it has assimilation, like it accommodates, it gives you space for further learning. It is the product of real interaction between the people in the environment of the target language and culture, where the learner is an active participant. Okay. In language acquisition, the learner is an active participant, and then it develops familiarity with the phonetic characteristics of the language as well as the structure and vocabulary. It is responsible for oral understanding, the capacity for creating communication and for identification of cultural values. So, at this stage, when the child is just of 1.5 years to 18 months, 2 years of age, when he is slowly picking up language, they start babbling and they start uttering monosyllabic, bisyllabic words, right from the very 6 to 8 months they picks up sounds. Then Broca area is involved. Once they pick up the understanding of language, what is your name, and suppose if we ask you what is this, they are able to communicate, then Wernicke's area is involved. So, theories of language learning, there has been theories who explain through behavior, through innateness, through social interaction, how do we acquire language. So, basically theories of language is explained by the behaviorism theory, the innateness theory, the cognitive theory, and interactionalist theory. Now, behavioristic psychologists, they believe that they have carried out many experiments on animals like rats, birds, and then could be taught to perform various tasks through the process of habit formation. The researcher identify the positive behavior and rewarded. The positive behavior were rewarded, and which is known as the positive reinforcement. And undesirable behavior was punished and simply not rewarded, which is known as the negative reinforcement. So, the behaviorist like B.F. Skinner then proposed this theory as an explanation for language acquisition for human being in verbal behavior. He stated that basic processes and relation which gives verbal behavior is its special characteristics are not fairly well understood. Skinner suggested that child imitates the language of the parents and other family members. When the child successfully utters the word or language, he was rewarded and praised. And and therefore, it was found that unsuccessful utterance were forgotten. Successful behavior were praised and reinforced, and unsuccessful behavior were stopped by not encouraging them. So, behaviorism theory has certain limitations. That is, language is based on structure or rules, which could be worked out simply, but not by imitations. They have only spoken about the imitation, positive behavior and negative behavior. How should positive behavior be reinforced and how should we stop the negative behavior? They didn't talk about the various other aspects which is involved in the language. Okay, that is the rules, the structure, the meaning, how should the child develops that. So, the mistake made by the children reveal that they are not simply imitating, but actively working out and applying rules. For example, when a child says drinked instead of drank and is not copying an adult, but rather overlapping the rules. So, this is the intelligent mistake that the child is committing. They are able to think. It is not only the behavior that matters, but here they spoke about the intelligence which have been overlooked. So, this theory has certain limitation. Most children go through the same stage of acquisition which takes place in a definite sequence of steps, and we refer to it as developmental milestones. The innateness theory. So, innateness theory has been published by Noam Chomsky. He is a behaviorist. He stated that children have an inborn faculty for language acquisition. According to his theory, the process is biologically determined and the human being has a brain which has neural circuits, contains linguistic information. Okay. So, he has come out that in the brain there are faculty of language acquisition. There are various circuits which are connected. At birth, child's natural predisposition to learn language is activated by hearing speech, and the child's brain is able to interpret what he or she hears according to the underlying principal structure which is already contained. So, he spoke about language acquisition device. The brain possesses circuits which is natural faculty and which is known as language acquisition devices. Chomsky stated that not only English child, but also all human beings share common principles of language. They all have words for things in action. They know what do they mean by the object. They also understand that the object occupies space. Okay. So, he has said that they are possessed with innate abilities to adapt not only the language they are in, but the language they are exposed to. So, the mechanisms such as applying them to the input data, the child ends up with something which is the member of the class of human language. So, the linguist universe then are the result of innate cognitive competency rather than the content of such a competence. So, he has basically spoken about the cognitive ability of the child. The child picks up language as any other milestone which he achieves. He is able to crawl, stand, walk, and also picks up language. He acquires language, and this was given by Noam Chomsky. The limitation to this theory is Chomsky's work of language was theoretical. He was interested in grammar, and much of his work consists of complex explanation of grammatical rules. He did not study real children. He does not recognize the reason why a child might want to speak, the function of language. Subsequently, this theory have been has greater emphasis on the way in which real children develop language to fulfill their needs and interact with the environment, including other people. So, this theory also had certain limitations, and then the third theory is cognitive theory, which was given by Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget. He placed acquisition of language within the context of child's mental or cognitive development. He says that there is cognitive development that happens, and then the child picks up the language. He argues that a child has to understand a concept before he or she can acquire the particular language in which he or she expresses the concept. So, he has come out with the stages of development, sensory motor, pre-operational, formal operational. He has given the 4 stages, very important stages, which is picked up by the child, and one of the stage here in sensory motor development, how the object, the child understand object and the space it occupies. The child learns that each object has its own space. So, the best example in Jean theory of cognitive development, the process of seriation, which refers to the ability to sort out objects or situation according to any characteristics like the color, shape, size, etc. So, the student will be able to identify between the smaller and the bigger objects. And then object permanence, which is the phenomena often cited in relationship to the cognitive development. By the age of 18 months, child can realize that the object has existence independently of their perception, that is the object permanence. The cognitive theory draws attention to the increase in child's vocabulary at this stage, which shows a link between the object permanence and the learning of the label to object. Now, when they go to school and they picks up letters and they identify, this is how the cognitive development plays a vital role in acquiring a language. During the first year to 18 months, connections are possible to trace, but a child continues to develop, so that it is difficult to find clear link after 18 months that how does language and intellect is connected. So, that was the limitation of cognitive theory given by Jean Piaget. The last theory, that is the social interaction, assumes that language acquisition is influenced by the interaction of a number of factors such as physical, linguistic, cognitive and social. Cooter and Reutzel 2004 it was stated. This theory shares many of the same explanation as the other theories like the psychologists Lev Vygotsky and Jerome Bruner are associated with interactionist theory of language. So, from birth, children are surrounded by others who talk to them. The communication plays a vital role in learning of native language. Internationalist theory argues that language learning of the child is both biological and is a social product. Internationalists believe that children are born with brains which predisposes them to the ability to pick up languages as well as with the desire to communicate. So, author M.A.K. Haddy says babies acquire language in order to survive, have their needs met and express themselves. Vygotsky created a model called the human development known as he has created a model of human development which is known as socio-cultural model. He believes that all cultural development in children are visible in 2 stages. First, the child observes the adults communicating amongst themselves and later develops the ability himself to communicate. Okay. Vygotsky also viewed that a child learns better when interacting with those around him to solve problems. For example, in fact, as an adult, first talk at the child and eventually the child learns to respond, you know. So, we have seen grandparents, you know, looking at the infants and they will not keep quiet, they will express, they will, you know, say some words, they respond, they laugh, they giggle, they express, they smile. So, that is what happens. The child moves from gargling to baby talk to more complete sentences. See, Vygotsky's theory is one of the foundation of constructivism. It asserts three major themes. First, it is social interaction. Second, it is the more knowledgeable others, and third, it is the zone of proximal development. So, social interaction speaks, you know, plays a fundamental role in the process of cognitive development. He stated that every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, that is, one on the social level and later on the individual level. First, between people, we communicate between people, that is psychological, you know, intercommunication when you have communication between two people, and interpsychological, that is you know, you are able to have the development, and the second is inside, that is intra-psychological, which was stated by Vygotsky in the year 1978. He has also spoken about the more knowledgeable others. This refers to anyone who has better understanding of the higher level than a learner. So, here we can cite the example of teacher, parents, coach, adult who has better knowledge of it and the child approach to them. So, the more knowledgeable others could be a peer group, even a young person who has pretty good knowledge in that field. So, the zone of proximal development, this is ZPD, is the distance between a student's ability to perform a task under guidance or with peer collaboration and the student's ability to solve the problem individually. So, zone of proximal development speaks the individual's ability to solve and also individual ability to solve collaboratively, you know. So, Vygotsky has stressed upon the three important aspects in the acquisition of knowledge, that is acquisition of language, that is social interaction, the more knowledgeable others, and zone of proximal development. According to Vygotsky, learning occurred in this zone. So, Vygotsky's theory promote learning context in which students play an active role in learning. The teacher should collaborate with his or her students in order to facilitate the meaningful construction of knowledge. Learning therefore becomes a reciprocal experience for the students and teachers. So, this theory, you know, what we have learned, Brunner also called the term language acquisition support system, okay, is response to Chomsky's language acquisition device. So, the four important theories that we have discussed has contributed to the acquisition of language acquisition. So, the limitation of interactionist theory is that these theories serves a useful correctives to Chomsky's theory. Critics have cited some limitations, such as there is a creation of cognitive overload on children and there may be potential misconceptions. It overestimates the power of the individual to create their own language. It neglects the emotional dimensions, focusing only on logical behavior. So, the limitations of interactionist theory is that, so it has overlooked, it has only focused on logical behavior and overlooked other dimensions. Now, coming to the language learning strategies, how can one develop the ability to enhance language learning capacities? So, learning strategies are used by the learner to acquire, to take inputs and to use information to make one's learning quick and simple, more effective, which can be passed to new situations. So, learning strategies will help the learners to use English language successfully. Language autonomy can be acquired and self-efficacy can be improved through learning strategies. So, learning strategies will make you more independent user of language. You will be more confidently using a language with language learning strategies. There are 6 major language learning strategies which are mentioned here. The first is cognitive strategy, the second is mnemonic strategy, the third is metacognitive strategy, the fourth strategy is compensatory strategy, the fifth is affecting strategy, and the sixth is social strategy. Now, we will go into each of it. What is cognitive strategy? Cognitive is something which is dealing with your brain. So, behavioristic and cognitive psychologists Skinner and others, we have seen it, both the theories guide the teacher to select and follow the principles of teaching of any language. So, in this theory, behaviorists consider language as a process of conditioning, and the expected learning outcome is achieved through a series of stimulus and response. For every stimulus given, there is response. What input you give to your student, there is a response for it. So, they have spoken about the SR relationship, that is the stimulus response relationship. According to behaviorists, learning takes place due to the relationship between stimulus and learner's response to it. Behaviorists believe that these responses of learners to the stimulus are automatic and as a result of deliberate thought. So, the response of SR, stimulus and response, is automatic and result on deliberate thoughts. So, cognitive psychologists consider language learning as a meaningful process. So, cognitive strategies give examples like guessing, intuitive, deductive reasoning, rearranging, and taking note of are certain examples of cognitive strategies which helps you in language learning. Mnemonic is the strategy assists the learner to connect newly learnt knowledge. Okay. So, you make a mnemonic, if the word is too big, you have short forms to it. Knowledge with what they have learned, they are useful for remembering knowledge in a systematic way. For example, sounds as in rhyming, body language of the learners following teacher's command. Mnemonic strategy connects old and newly learned knowledge in a stimulus response manner. So, first we have learnt about cognitive, which is all about inductive, deductive, rearranging information, taking notes of. Second is remembering the thing in a mnemonic form, which has a connection between the old and newly learnt. Metacognitive strategy, this strategy will help the learner to focus on his area of interest, okay, his needs, his style of learning, how he can fix a goal and how he will be able to achieve it through proper steps. So, cognitive process also helps the learner to handle particular language task. Compensatory strategy is by guessing the meaning of an idea, by listening to or reading, filling the gaps of, okay, and then guessing, filling the gaps of, gesturing, and then using synonyms. Okay, these are the various strategies which is very much helpful and which is called as compensatory strategies and is used in language learning. Affecting strategy. So, as a learner you should be identifying your feelings of happiness, unhappiness, anxiety, how this can have an effect on your positive and negative attitude, and your belief, your strength, how can it contribute for language learning. So, a effective strategy plays a very vital role in learning a language. If you are determined, if you have a strong will, if you have made up your mind to study, then you picks up easily. Social strategies. This strategy helps students to develop about the culture of the target language speaking people. Using this strategy, learner can learn how to discuss with others and solve problem. Having social skills, having interacting with others and finding out a solution for any issue, any problem. Language learning strategies have been classified by many scholars. So, here Stearns 1992, he has given the classification of language learning strategies. According to him, there are 5 language learning strategies, that is management and planning strategy, cognitive strategy, communication experimental strategies, interpersonal strategy and effective strategy. So now we have discussed how should you be carrying, how should you be managing and planning the strategy for better learning. This strategy mainly speaks about that how well can you manage and plan your activities or strategies for better language learning. This strategy is also related with the learner's intention to direct his own learning. Okay. So, what commitment to make for language learning? What is your commitment towards the language learning? Set himself reasonable goals, the goals which is in your reach and which you can easily attain. Decide on an appropriate methodology, your own methodology through which you can easily able to acquire or easily able to learn a language. Set appropriate resources and monitoring progress. And then evaluation plays a very important role. Once you have learnt, how much did you learn? You are supposed to evaluate even that aspect also. Evaluate his achievement in the light of previously determined goals and expectations. The second strategy is cognitive strategy. This strategy speaks about the direct analysis, transformation, synthesis of learning, finding out information, clarification, guessing, deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, practices. So, and also memorization, how well you can memorize things, how well can you monitor. So, the third strategy that we are speaking about is communication. Communication is very vital and important. Communication experimental strategies are the technique used by both native and non-native speakers of any language. So, this strategy is used to communicate with others. The use of this strategy is the best solution that compensate the learner's lack of knowledge. So, it is through gesturing, paraphrasing and asking for a repetition and explanation for better understanding and better communicating, and also maintaining a conversation. The purpose of these techniques is to avoid interrupting the flow of communication. Okay. Interpersonal strategy is interpersonal is between two, intrapersonal is talking to yourself. Interpersonal concern themselves of fostering students' need to relate personally to the curriculum and to each other. Okay, they use teams, partnerships and coachings to motivate students through their drive for membership and relationship. So interpersonal helps you, have a reciprocal talk. You are having a conversation, and together there is you are focusing on the development and evaluation of the performance. Effective strategy, as we have discussed earlier, your aptitude, your attitude, your positive thoughts contribute for better learning skills. So importance of language learning strategies. What are the importance? Language learning strategies are good indicators of how learners task and problem encountered during the process of learning. So language learning strategies makes you more confident. You will be able to identify the problems you have encountered in the process of language learning. Okay, so they are language learning. According to Hederholt, the language learners are capable of using language learning strategies to improve their language skills in a better way. Metacognition, improving to organize of time, learning time, self motivation and self evaluation. Cognitive strategies helps in using previous knowledge to solve new problem. Socio is the way you behave, have a rapport with the others, and how do you groom your social skills and use your language in working together. Social effective strategies involve asking the learners to correct their pronunciation, asking the students to work together with the classmate on a particular language problem. So developing skills in these three aspects, that is metacognitive, cognitive and socio-affective order. Now, okay, I hope your knowledge pertaining to various theories of language acquisition. We have discussed the 4 theories of language acquisition, and we have also discussed the 5 strategies of language learning. Now we will have a differentiation between what is language acquisition and what is language learning. So what is language acquisition? Language acquisition gives importance on picking up language. It is from parents that a child learns to develop the mother tongue, that is acquiring knowledge. Now language learning give importance to studying a language. When you are enrolled in a school, you are given your language as English first, then slowly once you are shifted to your class 1, then you have Hindi. And suppose your first language is Hindi and second language is Telugu, then at 4th class you learn Telugu. So this is what, so here first language, second language you are, here you are making deliberate efforts when comes to learning the language. You are learning the letters, you are learning the grammatical aspect, you are learning the structure, meaning, everything. So language learning is deliberately involving yourself to learn a language. The second point which is under language acquisition is it focuses on practical knowledge. So how you ask the child to place this thing there, he will follow your instruction. So here we are able to communicate. We are not going to the theoretical aspect, how language came into existence, how you have picked up language. We are not bothered in language acquisition, whereas in language learning it focuses on theoretical knowledge. Language acquisition is unconscious and implicit, right from parents to children and the other family member. It's implicit, it is not shown, but whereas language learning is conscious and explicit, that is you are involved consciously in language learning. So language acquisition takes place in informal situation, language learning takes place in formal situation. You take up classes for it, you go to school, you learn it, either online, offline, you learn that language, that is language learning. Whereas language acquisition, you acquire it in informal situations. Language acquisition has stable order to learning. and it has a stable order. There is no complexities in language acquisition. The parents teach the student and children slowly picks up from syllable to the construction of sentences to paragraphs to essays, whatnot. But here it is a complex order, that is, it proceeds from the simple to complex order of learning. Language learning is not complex learning, it goes through a process which has simple order to the complex order. I hope your understanding of what language acquisition and language learning is clear. Okay. So, we have discussed citing ample examples what acquisition is and what language learning is. Okay. I hope your knowledge pertaining to the topic is clear. Thank you.